This was a request
YuGiOh, players
from
will use the term
Duologs. Well, not
tiers
the
in order
Duologs
to describe how
but
strong a deck
video
is.
from
And since tiers are
Duologs.
basically a fan-made thing
Yeah.
and not an official rating system,
Top 5
there is a lot of
best
confusion
tier
about
0
what the
decks in the
tiers
history of
actually
YuGiOh.
mean.
Dragon Rulers
But
will
the
not be
most
here
commonly
because they're the best
accepted one
deck to
amongst the
never be
competitive
tier
community
0.
is the one devised by the Pojo forums a long time ago, where basically a deck's tier is described by how many topping decks appear in events. And if a deck takes more than 65% of top spots in big events, then it is considered a tier 0 deck. If a deck
Which
only
Dragon
takes
Rulers
15
never
to
did.
65% of top spots, however, then it is only a tier 1 deck. So, enough with that introduction. At number 5, we have Chaos Yata.
Yeah, I figured Yata
Back
Lock
in
was going to be here
2004,
somewhere.
Konami released the Chaos support.
Why
which
do
was
this now?
basically a
Celebrating
series of
Yata
cards
being
that
free at
required both
last.
light and
Chaos
dark
Emperor
attribute
Dragon
monsters in order to do
and
things.
Yata can finally
One of those was
have
Chaos
fun
Emperor
together.
Dragon and Blue
Again.
at the end. A
Off the ban
completely
list.
broken, overpowered card that had the same stat line as Blue Eyes White Dragon and could special summon itself from your hand by simply banishing one light and dark monster from your graveyard. And its effects allowed you to send all
This
cards
lock
in both
will never
players' hands
happen
and on
in
the field to the
2022.
graveyard to
I
inflict
shouldn't say
300 damage to your opponent
never
for each
because
card sent
anything's
to the
happened,
graveyard with
but
its
still.
effect. There was also another card called Yantagarasu, who had the effect that if it inflicted battle damage to your opponent, you could skip your opponent's next draw phase. So, what players would do is have either Sandgan or
Spirit
Witch of the
monster
Black
with that
Forest on the
cannabis
field,
for some
use
conditions.
Chaos Emperor
Don't break
Dragon's
the
effect to
game.
send all cards on the field and in both players' hands to the graveyard, which would proc one of the two cards' floating effects, which would then allow you to add Yatagarasu from your deck to your hand. And then you'd simply normal summon the little bird, attack, and your opponent would be locked out of doing anything. As long as you attack with
I wonder if
Yatagarasu
magical
once
scientists
per
will be on
turn,
this
and
list.
your opponent had no cards in their hand, they could not break the lock, and they essentially would just lose the game. And prior to the Yata lock, YuGiOh did not have any forbidden cards yet.
Nope.
They had a ban list, but they had only ever limited cards
That
on
wasn't
it.
really a
I think
ban.
it was called the restricted list or
Yeah.
something, where you could just play one copy per deck. But they hadn't actually banned a single card
Imagine
in
if that
the
was
game
still
yet.
Yu-Gi-Oh today.
And yet
There was
so
no
many people were
banned
playing the
cards,
Yata
just
At least
restricted
85%
cards.
of top spots were taken by this combo, according to some of my sources, that Konami felt the need to ban cards for the first time. So both Yatagarasu and Chaos Emperor Dragon got banned, and were no longer allowed to be played in
Because if
decks.
they weren't,
And
odds
even
are the
after
game
that, people still played
wouldn't
Chaos
have
decks like
died
crazy,
immediately,
and it was
but
even a Chaos
over
deck that
time.
won the first ever World Championship in 2004. And it got to the point where every deck was basically a variation of Chaos decks. All 32 spots were taken by Chaos decks, so eventually they hit the remaining Chaos cards, namely Black Luster Soldier and Chaos Sorcerer.
Chaos
And they
format
weren't
is
released
basically
from the
GOAT
ban list for
format in
almost
a
10 years
sense.
afterwards. Now, the power creep of the game has gotten to the point where this deck wouldn't be that good anymore.
Nope.
And could probably be defeated by any meta deck
Mind
that
you, that's
exists in
because
today's
Chaos Emperor
format.
Dragon's been a
So
rod.
that's why it's at the
but, you
bottom
know,
of this list, the number 5 spot, even though Yantagarasu is still technically a banned card to this day.
Well, not
There are
anymore.
so many cards with graveyard effects
What's
that
funny
just
is
getting
that
rid of your opponent's hand wouldn't
the
actually
Duologs
limit the
really
duel
made a
anymore.
video
And it's kind of
recently
been
about
power
like
crept a
cards
little
that make
bit.
you skip your opponent's
Although,
turn, and Yata's
fun
in it,
fact,
and he had to add in
in a
post
lot of the old
the
Yu-Gi-Oh
fact,
games,
oh look,
if you manage to pull off the Yata
Yata's
lock,
been taken off
the
the
AI
list.
is programmed to instantly surrender.
and yeah, that's true.
And at number 4,
Even they
we
knew
have
Yata lock.
Teledan.
Ah, Teledan, I
was
should
a
have
deck
guessed.
that revolved around Dark Arm Dragon, a card who has the effect where if you control exactly 3 dark monsters
People
in
were
your
waiting
graveyard,
for our
you can special
MOM
summon this
monster
card
to
from
go
your
with
hand.
DAD,
And it also
made
has
in
a
Macrobee.
not once per turn effect, where you can banish 1 dark monster from your graveyard in order to destroy 1 card on the field. So if you bring out Dark Arm Dragon, you should be able to destroy 3 cards immediately with its effect. However, the great thing about Dark Arm Dragon
It is the best
was
armed
that
dragon
nothing
card.
about it was once
Fight
per
me.
turn, including
Well,
its summoning
until
condition.
Thunder
So if
Arm
you had 3
Dragons,
Dark
but,
Arm Dragons
you
in your
know,
hand, you could bring them all out as
holding
long
the
as you
title
met the
for like
conditions of one
almost
of them,
10 years is
as
still
you
pretty
didn't actually
notable.
have to remove any resources to bring the card out on the field. And then, as long as you could fill your graveyard up with dark monsters, you could destroy every card your opponent controls. And when Dark Arm Dragon came out, they had also released a whole bunch of dark support cards.
Yep.
And Destiny Heroes were seeing some success with a whole bunch of different kinds of decks. And they
I'm
were
sure they
all
won't
dark
happen when they
type
get a new
monsters.
fusion
So when
monster.
Synchro Monsters came out, along with the new Psychic type monsters, and a card called Emergency Teleport,
And all the
which is a
psychics
quick
are-
play spell card that
well,
lets
at
you
least a good
special
chunk of the
summon
psychics
any
at the
level
time
3 or
were
lower
darks.
Psychic type monster from your deck. But it's banished during the end phase. So, if you brought out Krebons, which is a level 2 dark psychic type monster, you could
Love
use it with
Krebons.
one of your Destiny heroes to go into Synchro monsters. That would then give you 2 dark monsters in your
Old
graveyard
school
immediately.
style.
And since the rest of the deck revolved around manipulating the cards in your graveyard and bringing back your banished monsters, you had a deck that could spit out level 6 and 8 Synchro monsters pretty easily, including really good stuff like pre-nerf YuGiOh Guardian and Stardust Dragon. And the same deck that could also bring out Dark Arm Dragon, who could then clear your opponent's board of anything that might give you any problems, while also just gaining advantage from the Destiny hero stuff, like Malicious bringing itself out from the graveyard. And a lot of the variants played Dark Lord Zerato, which allowed them to destroy even more monsters. It was just a deck that was able to both spam out good, big monsters, and also completely wipe your opponent's board selectively,
I don't have any
and do
arguments.
all of this pretty quickly and consistently, since you could special summon your main combo pieces directly from your deck, thanks to Emergency Teleport. And Teledad decks were so good, basically everyone was playing it, and I don't have actual numbers on it, but it's very safe to assume that
Yes.
Teledad decks won more than 65% of top spots at most big
Teledad
events when it was
defined a
still around.
format.
Basically, Teledad decks were so good and so commonly played that people were putting cards in their main deck specifically designed
That
just
we
to
have a
counter
shorthand
other
for
decks.
Teledad.
And Teledad decks
Teledad
basically
is
defined
literally
what a tier
E-Tele,
0 deck is,
which is Emergency
and was the
Teleport,
first tier 0
Dark
deck
Arm
in a
Dragon.
somewhat modern format, where
We
Yu-Gi-Oh started
shorthanded
going
it so
towards more
much.
extra deck focus, rather than main deck monster focus like it had been for the entirety of its life up to that
Yep.
point. But like
And it would
any
never
deck
go
that becomes
back.
tier 0, it eventually got destroyed by a ban list, where Dark Arm Dragon
Well, it
got
would never go
limited
back
to
until that
copy
one time
instead
when
of being
Monarchs were
banned.
popular for a
And
good week.
surprisingly, none of the other main combo pieces got banned either. Emergency Teleport and Reinforcements of the Army got limited to 1. Destiny Draw Malicious got both semi-limited to 2. And that was
Malicious
about
should
it.
never leave
Although
2.
hitting 5 of the main combo
Destiny
pieces
Draw
in the
going to
deck
2 is like a
did
what?
severely drop the consistency
But
of it,
it made some
especially
sense.
the 2 hits to Dark Arm Dragon and Emergency Teleport, the 2 cards the deck basically revolved around. And the hits to Dark Arm Dragon are kind of a good example that they don't always need to ban cards in order to kill an overpowered
That
deck,
is true.
as Dark Arm Dragon never got banned and basically stayed at 1 copy for years, until recently where it's starting to be loosened off the ban
Put
list.
Malicious to
And
1.
that's mainly
You might as well
because
abandon it at that
a
point.
full-powered Teledad deck probably couldn't compete with modern decks, and it definitely would not be able to defeat the next 3 spots on this list, as they are way more powerful than Teledad ever was. And at number 3, we have Zodiacs.
Ah, of course.
Zodiacs once took all top 32 spots at a YCS event
All
in
of
Pittsburgh in
them?
2017. And I don't think a deck has ever really met that kind
That's
of representation since
100%.
in the modern format. But probably some of the early tier 0 decks had a similar kind of representation. It's hard to get
It's
info on
understandable.
those,
Zoo
but
is really damn
Zodiac
good.
was a modern tier 0 deck, as it was only 2 years ago as of making this video, and easily took more than the 65% of top spots
Damn, look,
required,
Imperial
as
Order,
it even took
Ghost Ogre,
100% of top
Maxi.
spots in one major event. Now, the reason
Couple
Zodiacs were
Solons.
played so heavily when they were still a thing is
Ah,
because they can
because
be
it's old
splashed
school.
into any other deck
Why is the
very
fu-
easily
oh,
and
Northern,
acted
of
as an
course.
excellent engine, similar to how Dangers are today.
I like the
Although
random
most of the
Gagaga
decks that got
Samurai.
splashed into used enough Zodiac cards that it was basically a half Zodiac deck anyway.
Danger
and what the
Zodiac.
Zodiacs did that made them so good was they had this little gimmick where
Pick
you
the
can
Dangers,
exceed
put 'em in a
summon
zoo.
any exceeds Zodiac monster using any Zodiac monster,
I
including
never noticed.
other
I'm one of those
exceeds
idiots who
Zodiac
never noticed
monsters.
Dryden had
So,
tits
if you could get
until
out
the
a
Rank
single
10 Yu-Gi-Oh
Zodiac,
episode.
you could go into any Zodiac exceeds monster.
People would be like, how'd you not
and
notice
they
those
had
giant
2
knockers?
really good ones
Kind of
that
looking
are
at the
currently
giant
banned.
sword and
One of
giant
them was
hand
Zodiac
tracking my
Broad Bowl
attention.
that allowed you to detach
Excuse me
one
for
Exceeds
not being a
material
horny
to
male
search
for
out
5
any Beast
seconds.
Warrior type monster, which can be normal summoned or set from your deck, which was basically all of them and only excluded a few outliers. You can then immediately rank up Broad Bull into Zodiac Trident, who had the effect to destroy 1 face-up card in the field. And since this effect was spell speed 2, you could use it during your opponent's turn to disrupt plays. And being able to easily get out a spell speed 2 destruction effect like this is what made Zodiacs really good,
Broad
because
Bull's
that's
weapon
one of the
remind me
best
of
effects a
Scythe.
card can have.
probably the
And
angle.
it's pretty rare for a monster
In
to
fact, I'm
have
seeing
spell
Scythe
speed 2
everywhere already.
destruction effects like
Ugh.
this. And also, Zodiac decks could search out Zodiac monsters real easily, and all of the Zodiac main deck monsters had extra effects where they would give the Exceeds monster they were materials to an extra effect. So Zodiac Rat Pier had the effect where if it wasn't Xseed's material, of a Zodiac monster basically, you could have that Xseed's monster detach one of its materials to special summon another copy of Rat Pier from your hand or deck, who could then be used as the full material for any Zodiac Xseed's monster, who would then gain the effect to special summon another Rat Pier from your deck, since its effect was not a hard once per turn. So with a single Rat Pier, which could be special summoned directly from your deck with Zodiac Barrage, could get you 4 monsters on the field and an extra card in your hand without using your normal summon. Using Zodiac Rat Pier's effect twice, and a Zodiac Tiger Mortar to special summon another Zodiac from the grave, and Zodiac Broadbolt adding a card to your hand from your deck. So a single Barrage could essentially allow you to go +5, and that wasn't even the full potential of the deck. They even had combos that allowed them to special summon Coach King Giant Trainer to draw 3 cards, and they were the only meta deck that brought out Elder Entity Norden through fusion summoning, rather than just relying on instant fusion, using Fusion Substitute.
It is
But they
funny
also
to be
do
like
use
the
instant
only way
fusion as
Norden
well.
was fusion
And
summoned
Elder Entity Norden
was
is
in
already
Zoo.
a broken card on its own. So the
Yes,
fact that it
Norden
worked
is
so
banned
well
and
with
should
Zodiacs
stay
just kind
banned.
of gave it even more
It would be
advantage.
it would be taken off
And
the
I
ban
have
list
to
next
remind you,
list.
this archetype could easily get out all of this advantage, and they could start this combo with any Zodiac monster. It was one of the most hyper-consistent decks ever made, that also allowed you to get an insane amount of advantage, while playing nice with pretty much any other archetype you might want to throw into
And the ban
support
list
it.
is still
The
throwing
only real
hands with
limiting
Zoo to this
factor to
day.
Zodiacs was that their Xseed's monsters could only bring themselves out once per turn, using their effect to rank themselves up on top of any Zodiac monster.
So like how you can
But you could
reincarnation
bring them
link
out
summon once
again
per
the
turn
old-fashioned way,
sell them on
and
links.
Zodiac decks would absolutely bring out Zodiac Broad Bowl multiple times per turn, because for some reason, its search effect was not a hard once per turn. And since they could get so much advantage on the field so easily, they could search out anything they wanted from their deck. And then Zodiac Whiptail allowed any Zodiac Xseed's monster to banish any monster it battled.
I don't
which could
remember
be
which
attached
Zodiac
directly
is
to the card
my
from your hand during the
sign,
battle
but
phase.
I'm a
So it wasn't really
Sagittarius, so
safe
what
to
that
attack
matters.
into any of the Xseed's monsters.
So I think I'm the
what Konami
pig.
finally did in order to stop everyone from using Zodiacs in every
Which
single
doesn't
deck
even look like a
was
pig.
they limited Zodiac Rat Pier to 1 copy, which essentially killed the card because it means it has no effect when
Oh,
it's
no,
attached to a
that's not
monster
Zodiac's
anymore,
version of
as it only
Sagittarius. That
works
is
with other copies of itself.
1995 this year
And
for
then
me.
they banned Zodiac Broadbolt and Zodiac Trident. And in the
I
OCG,
think
they
Broadbolt
went a
came
step
off at some point.
further
Dryden
and
had a good
limited
week
Zodiac
and they put
Barrage
it back
as well.
when it got
Or
free
I
and then
think
got
they
put
banned
back
it
on
and
again.
then recently put it back to 1 copy. You know an archetype was good when they banned multiple copies of a card from the archetype. And currently, Zodiacs don't really see any play, since
That
they
would
hit all the
change when
cards that allow them to
frickin'
gain
Zeus
a whole
came
bunch of
out.
advantage, and they no longer have Spell Speed 2 Destruction, which turned out was a really good effect to the point where they don't really function without it. And full power
The ban list
Zodiacs
is still
would still be good
fighting
even today
Zoo
with
to
the new
this
link
day.
restrictions. If anything, I think they could probably be
Everyone
even
says
better.
the fucking tanky
But
was hit because
surprisingly, I think the top 2
Tri
spots
Brigade.
are
I
better
like to
than
think it was
Zodiacs
Zoo.
if they were to face off against each other at full power. Because what beats a deck that's hyper consistent and can go +5 easily? How about decks that can do the exact same thing while also getting a whole bunch of negates on the board?
Oh jeez, Dragon
And
Link.
at number 2,
Probably not
we
yet.
have Pepe.
Of course.
Pepe was the name given to Perform Repel Perform Mages, as the 2 archetypes work together.
Here's how this
and both
archetype
started
works.
with PE.
U plus
Now,
by
remember
making
how
your
Zodiacs
opponent
could set up
minus.
+5 combos with any card in their deck? Well, Pepe could basically do that
They could
as
just
well,
didn't have
and
anime
it could
Turtle.
use its advantage a little bit better, as they could consistently set up
God,
Cyber
Monkey
Dragon
Board is
Infinity
back.
with a nature
I
of
still
Beast,
can't believe that.
and search out a couple of
It's
solid
limited,
strikes
but
from
it's
their
still
deck,
back.
all while going +5 or more. The Pepe deck had a card called Perform Repel Monkey Board, which was like a searcher for
I
your
saw a
searchers that could
meme that
search
was
out
like
your other
the
searchers.
entire
It was
how
a
to do
one-card
Pepe
pendulum
combo,
setup,
and it looked like
when
a
this card is placed on the
goddamn.
scales, you can
I don't
add a
know.
level 4 lower Performapal monster from your deck to your hand. So,
It was
if you set
just
Monkey Board
huge-
while
it was
you
like an
had
actual
Performapal
map of
Guitar
like a
Turtle,
subway
you
system or
could set up
something.
your scales while going +2.
You ever seen like
and
one of
there
those
were 7
signs at a
other
railroad
cards
train
that
system
also
thing
allowed you to
about
go
like
plus
the
off
train
of their
goes here,
effects,
here, here,
with
here,
2
here,
of
here,
them
here,
allowing you to
whatever the
gain
fuck.
pluses off of activating the pluses of some of the other cards.
You don't know
And
what I
that's
mean.
not even
Google is your
including Monkey
friend.
Board or Guitar Turtle. So technically they
The
had
train
like
thing. I don't
9
know about the
searchers.
Pepe combo
And since this
thing.
was during Master Rule 3, they could easily set up their extra deck with a whole bunch of monsters and then bring them out again for some extra deck plays. And easily bring out Teller Knight Tolmaeus, who could rank up into Cyber Dragon Infinity. They could easily go into King of Feral Imps to search out X-Saber Paler Muro, who could be used with Perform Mage Hat Tricker to Synchro Summon Nature a Beast.
Oh, it's
And
not
in
a
the OCG,
spellcaster.
they still had access to Shockmaster,
a
which they could
pendulum
easily
summon.
go into with his deck. And with Guiding Ariadne, they could
I
search
still
out
think
multiple
Shockmaster
copies
could
of
come
Solemn
back,
Strike
but that's
during
just
your
my
turn,
opinion.
just by doing their plays like normal, as a lot of their cards allowed them to destroy Guarding Ariadne to
Maybe
proc
wouldn't
its
do
effect.
absolutely nothing, but I'd like to
Since
see
like
come
10
back
cards
just
in
to
the
see
deck could search out the
meta
other
fucking
cards, and then
dissolve
themselves be used as combo pieces to bring out
in
negates.
fear and
The
shock.
deck was
Mostly. It
incredibly
would then go back
consistent
to what it was doing
and could
before,
shut
but
down
still,
pretty much any deck.
there'd be a
if it
good
went
5 minutes
first,
of like, wait,
and
what?
could play through a few negates if it went second. The deck was so good that it called for an emergency ban list, where they then immediately banned Perform Mage Plush Fire, which for some reason did not have a once per turn on its special summon from the deck effect,
Genius.
Perform Mage Damage Juggler, and Teller Knight Tomias. Then they limited Performapal Skullcrabat Joker, Performapal Monkey Board, and Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer, where they eventually just banned Monkey
Yeah.
Board and Joker as well. So immediately hitting 6 cards from the deck would kill just about anything, considering they
think they brought
completely
damage
destroyed
strickland back
Zodiacs
at
by
some
only
point.
hitting 3 cards.
Flush Fire, no.
And to this day, some of these cards are still banned, even though Pepe isn't as effective with links. Or maybe it could be even better, I don't know. They could get out so much advantage so easily that I
It
just
really
they'd
sucks
be
that
able to
Perform Mages
use
took the
their
hit
advantage
because
with link
Performapals
monsters,
were crazy.
especially with the much
But
better
Performapals
pendulum
get to
support
come
that's
back
been
first.
released since they've all been banned.
Damn main characters.
And at number 1, we have Spirals.
Ah, Spirals.
Here's the
Forgot
funny thing
them.
about Spirals. They were tier 0 in 2017, and Zodiacs were also tier 0 in 2017.
How do you have two tier
So
zeros at the same
2017
time?
was the only year to have 2 tier 0 decks in it.
Ridiculous.
And what's funny about Spirals being tier 0 is that they essentially had the entire archetype already
I mean, I
released,
played in 2017.
and they weren't
I
seeing
know
very
that,
much
but
competitive
still,
success.
God, 2017
Then,
was
when
5
Link
years
Monsters
ago.
got released,
Christ.
Konami started giving all of the archetypes their own Link-specific cards, and Spirals were given Spiral Double Helix, which was such a good card that it instantly shot Spirals to tier 0 status. And I even have some graphs from OCG events.
It's almost
that show
a full
Spirals
art
taking
with Zephyr
69
Inferno.
and
It's there in the
91% of
way.
top
Hey, Zephyr's
spots
there
at 2
again.
separate events.
And
So
other probably
they
just
easily
Inferno.
qualify as a tier 0 deck. So what made Spirals tier 0? Well, kind of
Support.
a combination of both Zodiacs and Pepe, where Spirals were hyper consistent, they could get out negates on the board, and also get out multiple monsters with spell speed 2 disruption during your
It was
opponent's
almost like a
turn.
rock, paper,
Because you
scissors
see,
format.
Spirals have 2 cards called Spiral Quick Fix and Spiral Gear Drone that both have effects
they're machines that you can
basically allow you to go
machine
plus
dupe.
1, and both of these cards do not have hard once per turns on these effects. And they're both also machine type monsters with less than 500 attack. So
They
they're
knew
both
what they were
targets for
doing.
machine duplication that let you special summon 2 copies
Sometimes
of them from the
Konami
deck,
does have happy
each one being
accidents,
a
but
potential
sometimes it
plus
feels
1.
like you knew
They also
exactly
have a
what you
field
were
spell
doing.
card that allows them to once per turn add any spiral monster from their deck to their hand. But it's only a
The
soft
spy
once per
gal
turn.
is watching.
And they also have a card called Spiral Master Plan, which can
Oh.
add a Spiral Mission card from your deck to your hand,
She's in
and
there
if
for
it's sent
sure.
from the field to the graveyard, you can add the field spell card as well as any Spiral monster from your deck to your hand. So it has the potential to allow you to go plus 3 with this effect. So how Spiral Double Helix allowed the strategy to become tier 0 is because Double Helix allowed you to take any one Spiral monster from your deck or graveyard, and then either add it to your hand, or special summon it to a zone this card points to. So if you just special summon Spiral Master Plan directly from your deck, you could search out any Spiral monster, get the Spiral Field spell card that allows you to search out another Spiral monster, and get a Link monster on the field, as you had to send Spiral Master Plan to the graveyard to activate its double search effect.
Yep.
And since this was in the early days of Link monsters, Firewall Dragon was still at 3
Oh,
copies,
Christ alive.
which is
It's
currently a
pre-errata.
banned Link card for having a broken effect. Where if
Well,
a
that's
monster this
changed,
card
but
is
this is an
pointing
old
to
video.
goes to the graveyard, you can special summon a monster from your hand. So with Spiral Quick Fix's ability to special summon itself from the graveyard,
Like in the
Spiral's Super
Interspace
Agent's effect to special summon itself from
or
your
the
hand,
Cyberspace
and the
incidents
crazy
coming up.
amount of searches you
We're
can
gonna
get
deal
with
with
the other
pre-errata
Spiral cards,
Firewall.
you could easily bring out multiple copies
no.
of Firewall Dragon, have it co-linked with copies of Spiral Double Helix, as its link arrows were perfect for co-linking with Firewall Dragon, to then add more Spiral cards from your graveyard back to your hand with Firewall
I
Dragon's
don't care
other
how
effect,
good Dark
where it
Fluid
could add
is.
monsters from the
Firewall
field or
will
graveyard to your
pre-erase the
hand
ultimate Link
equal to the
monster.
amount of monsters it's co-linked to. And Spirals also have another card called Spiral Sleeper, who's like the Zodiac Dryden of the Spiral archetype, where it can target one Spiral card you control and 2 cards your opponent controls, and then destroy those cards. So if you simply equip Sleeper with Spiral Gear Last Resort, Spiral Gear Last Resort makes it so it can't be destroyed by card effects. So Sleeper can just target itself with its own effect to destroy any 2 cards your opponent controls. And this destruction effect is spell speed 2. So you could destroy 2 cards your opponent controls during your opponent's turn, instead of just 1 like Dryden could. And also,
and this is all in their first turn.
In addition to being able to search out any card from their deck once per turn, also protected their Spiral cards, as your opponent could not target your Spiral cards for card effects while the field spell card was out. So, with Spiral Sleeper on the field, equipped with Last Resort, and a Tri-Gate Wizard triple co-linked with a Firewall Dragon, you'd have 2 quick effect disruption effects, as most Spiral decks would go into a second Firewall Dragon in order to use its quick effect during your opponent's turn, as it can only be used 1 time while it's face up on the field.
And it's not a hard one.
Then they'd have their negate with Tri-Gate Wizard, and a full hand of hand traps, as they would have gained an incredible amount of pluses with all the Spiral cards going off. So eventually what they did was limit both Spiral Quick Fix and Spiral Gear Drone to 1 copy, so you can no longer benefit from the Sheen duplication shenanigans.
They should just did duplication as well while they bragged.
They also banned Blackwing, Gofu the Vague Shadow, and Grinder Golem, which helped a
spite.
lot with their link plays. They put set rotation to 1 copy, which was a nerf to their ability to search out their field spell card, and then they eventually limited Firewall Dragon to 1 copy, where it was then eventually banned like a year later.
Yeah.
So surprisingly, having 3 of their main cards set to 1 copy was enough to rein in the deck, and it was no longer an overpowered tier 0 consistency engine like it was, as it really needed Quick Fix, Drone, and Resort to be at multiple copies for it to do all of its shenanigans. Now, the reason I have Spirals at number 1 is because they have proven to be really good with Link monsters already, and they could set up their combos with basically any of their opening hands. So, they had the hyper consistency that's basically required of tier 0 decks, and they can also set up a board of negates and have even better protection with their field spell card. But honestly, I think a full power Pepe deck that's properly incorporated with Link monsters could easily match Spirals in some way, shape, or form. It's just Pepe was barely tier 0, as I'm not 100% sure it even got the full 65% representation since it got banned so quickly. So, we actually got to see Spiral shine a lot longer and got to see the full potential of an uncontested tier 0 deck in the modern
Spiral, no debate.
Alright, and that's it for the video. I feel like I should mention a couple of other decks people will probably ask about. Dragon Rulers are a very popular deck that was really strong, but they were never tier 0.
They were tier 1.
Because when Dragon Rulers were at full power, Spellbook of Judgment existed at the exact same time, which is probably one of the most broken cards in the game.
It is.
And Dragon Rulers at full power plus Spellbooks with Spellbook of Judgment both competed with each other for top spots, and made sure that neither one of them could get the 65% showings that were required in order to become tier 0.
Oh, wait, no,
even though both of those decks had the kind of power associated to tier 0 decks, and both of them could probably match any of the other tier 0 decks that I mentioned in this video, because they were just that good. But it was a case of them both coming out at the exact same time, and tiers are determined by results, and neither of those decks managed to get enough topping decks to qualify for tier 0. Even when Spellbook of Judgment got banned and Dragon Rulers weren't hit as hard, they still weren't tier 0. Dragon Rulers won basically all of the events, but they did not have 65% representation or more. They had like 35% or something. And that's why all the Dragon Rulers eventually got banned, because they kept winning everything.
Stop being good,
And if you've made it this far in the video, that means you probably like